To spend a few minutes talking about the Bharat Biotech vaccine, the Covaxin, which has been granted emergency use approval. Can you explain what this means and how the ICMR and the drug controller reached to this decision? Because the phase 3 trial results, the efficacy results are not known. So we've essentially given emergency use permission to a vaccine whose efficacy isn't certain, isn't determined, hasn't been peer reviewed. How comfortable are you with that decision? Why was this decision taken? And what can you tell us about the efficacy of the Bharat Biotech vaccine?
So first of all, I would like to congratulate the drug controller and the the subject expert committee who met on 2 successive days for 7-8 hours and deliberated and came up with this formulation for India, for Covaxin as well as for Covishield, which is a hugely innovative and a proactive step of the scientific community, having given approval to these 2 vaccines in a very innovative. As we know, the Indian government and the Indian response to the pandemic has always been innovative, proactive and preemptive under a strong leadership. And therefore, we have been able to manage this virus under and the pandemic in such a large population so effectively. So that is the point which I would like to say. In terms of the emergency use authorization, it has been given for both these vaccines. The emergency use authorization is slightly different for both of them. For Bharat Biotech, the emergency use authorization is a proactive step because we feel, the scientific community which were deliberating felt, and that is what is written in their recommendation, is that once the UK strain is has created havoc in the United Kingdom with 51,000 cases and 55,000 cases, they felt that this virus is now in India and they have had 29 cases, and the potential benefit of this whole virus vaccine may be more compared to any other vaccine. So it will add to the armamentarium of the Indian vaccine, Indian vaccination program to have 2 vaccines, just in case we have this virus spike up in this country. So that may be definitely more effective. And we have also, from the Indian Council of Medical Research, recently isolated the virus within 10 days, and we are looking at how this vaccine is going to be working on this the new mutant strain.
No, so I've understood the rationale behind your decision, but I'm curious to know what is the efficacy in the phase 2 and the phase 3 trials which are currently on. What is the kind of efficacy? And why I ask this is because from Moderna, from Pfizer, we've seen 90 plus, from AstraZeneca, we've seen 70% efficacy being mentioned, and therefore the question will be asked, the second vaccine that's been approved, what is the efficacy? Do we at this moment, Dr. Bhargav, know what is the efficacy of the vaccine that you've approved?
The virus was isolated from at ICMR. The virus was given to Bharat Biotech. They developed the vaccine. We did all the preclinical work in small animals and large animals and challenge studies at NIV Pune, and clearly demonstrated in challenge studies the efficacy of this vaccine. The phase 1 and the phase 2 trial on 375 and 380 subjects have shown tremendous safety and an immunogenicity of about 98%, with none of the patients in these 2 groups, phase 1, phase 2, getting COVID. Number 3, in terms of the phase 3 trial, 23,000 patients have got the first dose, and their safety is fully established in these 23,000 patients having been given this vaccination. And the whole trial should be completed in the next 3 or 4 days in terms of 25,800 patients. And the approval has been given for clinical under clinical mode, which means that these patients who will be given this vaccine will be closely monitored, and the regulator will look at the data more closely for both for this vaccine as well as for the other vaccine, but it will be monitored very, very closely, and a rolling review will continue to happen. So from that perspective, I think it is a great step that the government has been innovative and proactive, and refinements will continue to happen. And this decision, which is a science-based decision by the Scientific Subject Expert Committee, and then endorsed by the drug controller, I think it's a great moment for Indian science to show its prowess across the world.
There's an interview with Dr. Randeep Guleria, the director of AIIMS. He essentially says that the Bharat Biotech vaccine will be used as a backup in an emergency situation when there's a sudden increase in cases. It is the Serum Institute vaccine that will be used primarily. Can you explain that? So you've got approvals to 2 vaccines. How do you intend to use these 2 vaccines? What role will Covaxin play? What role will Covishield play? In the UK, for example, we're seeing drug regulators toy with mixed use, which means the first dose comes from one vaccine candidate, the second dose comes from another vaccine candidate. Is that something, Dr. Bhargav, that you're considering in India? How will you use the 2 vaccines that you've now given approval to, and in what quantities?
See, I have not given approval. I think the approval has been given by the regulator. The vaccine, I have been instrumental in getting the Bharat Biotech vaccine manufactured and tested, along with the private-public partnership with Bharat Biotech, with the Indian Council of Medical Research. The most important thing is that now we have 2 vaccines available, so there is a tremendous flexibility available for the government. We are worried about the UK strain, and the UK strain has the mutation, which is probably not responsive to the Pfizer or the Moderna vaccine, and therefore the CEO of Pfizer has said that we will modify the vaccine in the next. We can modify the vaccine in the next 6 weeks if the need be. Similarly, we have this whole virus vaccine, which will be potentially more effective against the UK strain. And therefore, this is a shot in the armamentarium of the Indian government to have 2 vaccines available. In terms of mixing doses, the United Kingdom has talked about that. However, the scientific reservations are there to mix different vaccines because we do not have data on the interchangeability and use of one dose of one vaccine and the second dose of another vaccine. We do not have any data in any country at of the moment on interchangeability. So both the vaccines can be stored between 2 to 8 degrees. Both the vaccines are 2-dose vaccines. Both the vaccines have to be given on 0 day and 28 days and can effectively reach the intramuscularly.
So, Dr. Bhargav, from what I've understood of what you just told us, you're essentially saying that vaccines like the ones by AstraZeneca, by Pfizer, by Moderna, your calculations are that the new UK strain can penetrate these vaccines, or these vaccines cannot protect against the UK strain. That's a concern that you have, which is one of the reasons why the Bharat Biotech vaccine, which you think will cover the UK strain, has been given approval, essentially suggesting that AstraZeneca may not be able to cover the UK strain?
We do not know that yet, but scientifically speaking, the Bharat Biotech vaccine being a whole virus vaccine, covering the entire surface of the virus, working on all the proteins of the virus, may potentially be more effective as we speak. We have been able to isolate the virus, the ICMR and IB Pune, within 10 days of the returnees who have returned to India with that virus, and we have been able to isolate the virus on a warp speed as we speak, and that virus will be tested with these different vaccines and their effectiveness in time to come, and it's being done at the moment at the NIV Pune.
So I was at the Pune facilities of Serum Institute just last week, and there I saw in their cold storage they had 5 crore vaccines ready to ship. So that's 50 million. I was told that the purchase orders are currently 20 million, that's 2 crores. And I'm wondering what happens to the rest. Will the rest be thrown open for public consumption privately so they can be sold at chemists? How soon may that happen? Or will the government be scaling up to purchase all that these vaccine manufacturers can produce? How do you see this? By when do you think some vaccine batches may be made available for private consumption for those who can afford to pay?
as you know, that the vaccines have got emergency use authorization approval, whether it be in the United States, whether it be UK, whether it be Europe or in India. So once they are in emergency use authorization, they will not be sold. They will be sold openly only after they get full licensure, which will be based on the data that will be submitted on a weekly basis to the regulator, and then the regulator may take a call whether full licensure should be given to a particular vaccine, and that may then be available in the open market. In terms of the number of doses that you have seen,
have you thought this through so far? If things go well and if the data is positive, how soon can full licensure happen, sir?
Well, I am delighted to hear that you have seen such large number of doses at the SII Pune, which is wonderful, and we all already know that India is the largest manufacturer of vaccines in the world, and these vaccines will be utilized for the Indian population first, and then there is a ray of hope for the low and middle income countries from this vaccine, which will be given by the COVAX facility, which has been established by the WHO as a donor country. We will be able to supply it to certain low and middle income countries, wherein 20% of the doses will be supplied to these countries, and India is one of the donor countries for that, and that will generate a lot of goodwill for the nation.
Sir, I have a few philosophical questions about the process in which the vaccines have been approved. Ordinarily, it takes about a decade and a half for a vaccine to get regulatory approval. In this case, it's happened in less than a year. How confident are you, as the man who's responsible for medical research in our country, that the processes haven't been short-circuited in a way that in the long run we find that these vaccines have side effects which weren't known because of how fast the approval process was pushed through?
That's a very valid and a very important question. And from the scientific perspective, I think India has realized that the way we have always underestimated our capacity. We have always underestimated the capacity of our scientists. They have worked day in, day out. We have a Make in India vaccine, we have a Made in India vaccine, and we find that India has done phenomenally well and has shown the world its scientific prowess. From my perspective and from the scientific community perspective, there have been no shortcuts, right from the rat study to mice study to hamster study to monkey challenge studies to phase 1 to phase 2 to phase 3. There have been no shortcuts, and the safety is absolutely of no concern in terms of both these vaccines. Safety is fully established, immunogenicity is fully established, efficacy is also established, and there is no reason to believe that there have been shortcuts as far as Indian regulator and Indian science is concerned.
But the vaccines so far have been administered in clinical conditions. And for our viewers, I want to explain that means that the refrigeration is properly ensured, that the temperatures which are supposed to be maintained, the hygiene standards that are supposed to be maintained are properly logged. The moment the vaccines leave the airports, reach to the distribution depots, go to, say, the ASHA workers, then life changes. Then you're out in the field. Then whether it's adequately refrigerated, kept out in the open, maybe bacteria can enter. So all those possibilities arise, which creates a greater prospect of there being some kind of a side effect. How are you looking at this transition from the clinical studies, which are naturally very well organized?
Sure. Rahul, I would not like to frighten our Indian population. India has been vaccinating, has a universal immunization program for the last 60 years. We have in fact vaccinating crores of mothers and children for several years. Having said that, we do have a very robust system in place. We have the COVID app. We have the dry runs which have been shown by your channel and other channels in different states, which have been carried out so effectively in all the states without any glitches, and we expect that the Ministry of Health has also has a system in place for several years, and even for this program, they have upscaled it in every which way, whether it be maintaining the quality, maintaining the robustness of the vaccine, maintaining the vaccinators in terms of the number of vaccinators, and also the hygiene standards. The important point to remember here is that these vaccines can be stored at 2 degrees to 8 degrees, which is an ordinary refrigerator, and unlike the -70 or the -90, which is for the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccine. For both these vaccines that have been approved in India, both are robust. They can be stored between 2 degrees and 8 degrees, and they can be given at 0 days and 28 days. In terms of fixing the vaccines you have asked, and I think that is one point where I don't think India is there is no scientific evidence as of the moment to mix the two vaccines. And also in terms of the timing of the dosage, there is not much data. Whilst the UK has said that we can give the doses after 12 weeks, but there is no data available to say that. So we will continue to give it at 0 day and 28 days for both these vaccines. And storing that at 2 to 8 degrees is not an issue at all as far as and we have heard the Ministry of Health talk about the number of refrigerators, number of cool chain systems that are already in place, and they have been upgraded. The Ministry of Health has been working day in, day out for setting up this program, communicating with all the states, right up to the block level, and those systems are in place.
That's important. And I also found a slight difference between what you're saying will be done with what the vaccine manufacturer is saying. AstraZeneca says 8 to 12 week gap is the best for maximum efficacy. You, however, just said that the second dose will be administered after 28 days. Why is that? If the efficiency is higher after 2 months or 3 months, why are then we going with 28 days? Can you explain the rationale behind that, Dr. Bhargava?
Yeah, the rationale behind that is that currently the data that we have and currently the application that has been processed by the regulator has been 0 to 28 days. In case we have all different data which is going to emerge, the regulator will look at it and a review will be done, and if and when any changes have to be made, they will be made accordingly.
That's important. Okay. Now, when someone hears that the vaccine has an efficacy of 70%, can you explain in common parlance what that means? Does that mean that if 10 people get vaccinated, the vaccine will be effective for 7? What then, according to you, happens to the other 3? Will they still get coronavirus?
That's an important question which you're asking, but you have to remember that the efficacy of any vaccine in the world is not 100%. Particularly for these respiratory viruses, the influenza virus vaccine that we normally give every year, or the pneumonia vaccine that we normally give every year, every 5 years, their efficacy is anywhere between 50 to 60%. So even after vaccination, we will have to continue with our COVID-appropriate behavior of the use of masks, washing hands, maintaining hygiene, and maintaining social distancing. So that will have to continue. Having said that, if we are able to vaccinate a critical mass and break the chain of transmission of the virus, we may not need to vaccinate the entire population of the country.
Do you have a target for month 1, month 2, month 3? How many people do you hope to vaccinate, Dr. Bhargava, in month 1 once the process rolled out?
There is a target. We have enough stockpile, and you have heard Aadar Poonawalla at your channel and at other channels, and we have enough doses available to vaccinate what we had planned for the frontline workers. Healthcare workers are 1 crore, frontline workers are 2 crores, and then you have the elderly population with comorbidities, more than 65, more than 50 years of age, or population with comorbidities. So gradually we will be doing all these 3-4 groups, and we expect to do about 30 crore population by July. But you never know, we may be able to do more. If the systems are smoothly running, we may be able to do more. More importantly, which I would like to reiterate, is that we may, if we are able to break the chain of transmission, we may not need to vaccinate the entire population.
What are your current calculations saying? What is your estimate about what percentage of our population will need to be vaccinated, after which we'll be able to snap the chain of transmission of the COVID-19 virus?
It is very difficult to say. If I am able to answer this question of yours, I'll get the Nobel Prize tomorrow.
Okay, this has been a big day for you personally and for India's fight against the COVID-19 virus. I wish you all the best. My questions were searching and probing, but in my heart I hope that this works out really well for India, because this virus has really locked us up, and hopefully we can see each other smile, we can go back to hugging each other, holding each other's hands, shaking hands, and doing the kind of things which were earlier so common and now so uncommon. Dr. Balram Bhargava, deeply appreciate the effort you and your teams have made, and thank you very much for taking out the time to join us.
Thank you so much, Rahul. I think this is a proud moment for every Indian, and it will, I hope, and we all hope and we wish that we are able to break the chain of transmission of the virus as soon as possible and return our life to normalcy as soon as possible. And I wish all the best. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time. All the best. God bless. The government has finally granted emergency use permissions to 2 Indian companies to roll out the first Indian vaccines in COVID-19. Joining us now is the Chief Executive Officer of Serum Institute, Aadar Poonawalla. Mr. Poonawalla, congratulations. Welcome. We have multiple questions swirling in our minds and in the minds of our viewers around the vaccines that will be rolled out. Question number 1 to you. How soon will the first batch of boxes that we saw in the cold storage facility of Serum Institute in Pune be leaving your manufacturing facilities and start taking those flights at Pune airport to all the distribution hubs that are waiting after the dry runs? How soon do you see this process start?
So, well, Rahul, as you rightly said, you firsthand witnessed and shot 50 million doses that were prepared and tested and packed, ready for dispatch. And, you know, as soon as the government has a firm agreement with us, they've indicated orally they want 70 to 80 million doses over the next 1 or 1.5 months. And they tell us where to send it. We'll send it across. And so I think another 7 to 10 days would be realistic for a few million doses to start reaching different states and parts of the country.
You said as soon as the government has a firm agreement. Can I press you to explain what as soon as we have a firm agreement means? Why don't we have an agreement already? Which are the loopholes, the questions, the concerns that remain, and how soon do you hope to be able to sign that agreement, and what is causing the delay?
Well, there's no real agreement even required. We're just waiting for some purchase orders, which is formal, normal paperwork to be done so that we can, you know, pack and dispatch the material and send it off. So we've offered a price where we're not going to make a lot of profit at all. In fact, we've offered a very special price of 200 rupees per dose. As you know, in the private market, we're going to sell it at 1,000. So you can see what we've done for the government and the people of India initially, because we want the poorest, the needy, the most vulnerable people to get the vaccine as soon as possible. And so we're just waiting for these formalities. There's no hitch at all. Maybe they were waiting for the licensure formally to come. Maybe that's the government policy. And then after that, they do the paperwork. But I would expect that very soon this week, given the announcement that came earlier on today from the DCGI.
So the whole world's been awaiting these vaccines, but because the world is in the middle of a life pandemic, the regulatory processes have been speeded up. And there are questions about the efficacy of your vaccine and of all other vaccines as well. From what I've understood, it's been declared that the Serum Institute Covaxin Covishield has an efficacy of 70%. What does that mean? Does that mean that if 10 people get the vaccine, it will be effective on 7? What happens to the other 3? Can you explain what efficacy means in the context of Covishield?
Okay, so let me explain in the context of Covishield first and what efficacy really is here. You know, we have proven in our trials that we have 100% efficacy on hospitalizations. So 0 hospitalizations were found in the people who took the Covishield vaccine globally, which is a great thing, which means it protects you against severe disease. You could still get infected, pass it on to others, because all the vaccines that we've heard about will not prevent infection totally. In half of the people who have got vaccinated, you'll still be infected and can infect others, but you will be protected. So if you saw the efficacy results of Moderna, Pfizer, which was 95%, in AstraZeneca and Oxford, which is the Covishield product, we were at 70% for one arm and 90% for the other. And that's going to be made very clear as well. We are recommending also to the government of India that you keep a 2.5 to 3 month gap. And this is very important for the viewers and everyone listening, that if you keep a 2.5 to 3 month gap between the first shot of Covishield and the second shot of Covishield, you will have a 90% efficacy. This is proven and even announced by the CEO of AstraZeneca, Pascal, publicly, I think a week ago. And even that data will come out very soon because this was the second arm of the study and efficacy studies that was done abroad. So again, just to summarize, there are only 2 or 3 vaccines in the world, Pfizer, Moderna, the Oxford AstraZeneca, and I think Sinovac as well, that have proven efficacy results. There is no other vaccine, including ours, made in India and others, Russia, China, or even India, that have proven efficacy at all. And efficacy means you have to vaccinate 20, 25,000 people and show that the vaccine actually protects you, not just a few hundred or a few thousand people to show safety and immunogenicity. So just to clarify, that is what Covishield has done. And we're one of 3 vaccines in the world, 3 or 4 vaccines in the world to have demonstrated efficacy. Nobody else has done that so far.
So if I understand what you said, you're suggesting that if I get a second dose within a month of my first dose, then the efficacy is about 70%. If, however, there is a gap of 2.5 or 3 months between the first and the second dose, then the efficacy is 90%. Is that what you're trying to suggest? Because in the results that we read in Lancet and elsewhere, it said that the AstraZeneca vaccine had an efficacy of 70%. So why this confusion between the results that came out earlier and the results that you are now claiming at this moment?
Well, I'm only echoing what the CEO of AstraZeneca has said, and it's come out from Oxford and AstraZeneca from the trials, because one arm, which did it with 1 month apart, was 60% effective to 70% effective, as you mentioned. And there was another few thousand group of patients where they gave a gap between dose 1 and dose 2. And that's where they found 90%. So, the regulator is going to recommend 1 month to 3 months as a gap. And then it'll be depending on the government and urgency and personal choice of how people want to go about vaccinating themselves. But logic would suggest you wait 2.5 months at least between dose 1 and 2, because, all vaccines, if you look at other vaccines as well, not just COVID-19 vaccines, the longer gap you keep between doses, the better the efficacy results that are found, because you're not loading the system again so fast, and you don't have cross neutralizing antibodies and so many other factors which I won't go into right now, which could affect the efficacy of the vaccine if you take it very closely together.
So what happens between dose 1 and dose 2? So let's assume somebody gets the first dose over the next few weeks, and then he needs to wait for 3 months for the second dose. Will he have any immunity at all? How many days does it take for immunity to start building? How strong is the immunity if you only have 1 dose and you haven't had your second dose yet?
So we found an excellent response below the age of 50 with 1 dose. And you know, different age groups, different people with different levels of immunity will respond differently. But we can say after a month, even with one dose, there's excellent protection, you know, more than even what you find from a COVID recovered patient. And when I say this, I'm talking about 70% of the people were pretty much fully protected with one dose. But the second dose is necessary for the long-term immunity protection and also for those who have not responded so well because of their age and other conditions from the first dose. So you'll definitely have protection, but at least 1 month has to pass after the first dose to get that protection. And let me add, even after the second dose, everybody should maintain masks, social distancing, till treatments and other options and a treatment is available for the disease, because it is a terrible disease, and you can get infected and infect others despite taking the vaccine. You will be protected, but for the safety and sake of everyone else, you know, maintain your precautions of social distancing and wearing face masks till we reach a certain level of herd immunity and vaccine herd immunity, which, as I said, will take a few years, because we're talking about 80–90% coverage across populations in the globe. So that's going to take a while.
Aadar Poonawalla, how will a person know that his body now has adequate immunity to be able to ward off that virus? Where does it get calculated? We know for those who are recovering from COVID-19 or those who think they may have had the virus but don't have it, there's something called the IgG antibody test. So you administer it to see whether your body is built antibodies. How will a person find out that the vaccine that you've administered to that particular individual has had some impact? How do we judge that?
Well, you have to do the S1, S2 and RBD tests to check your antibody levels, your receptor binding sites and receptor binding antibodies and all that, and also your T-cell responses. This is easily doable. A lot of labs offer these services, and one can check, you know, at least let a month pass between your first dose, and then maybe you can have a look and compare scores with your friends and see how well you're protected. But as I said, in healthy age groups and you know, people below the age of 50, even one dose has shown and demonstrated excellent results.
What's the guarantee that there won't be serious side effects? We heard from the government regulator saying that you know, the side effects are minor, but there have been instances in the US, one here in Chennai with one of your vaccines. He claimed that the results, the blowback that happened in his body was on account of your vaccine. You, of course, disputed it. What's the guarantee, Mr. Poonawalla, that there won't be serious side effects after taking your vaccine?
You know, vaccines can always give side effects. The safety studies are designed to rule out that your vaccine doesn't give severe side effects. Now, the example that you're referring to was also ruled out by the Health Ministry and DCGI not to even be related to the vaccine. So I must clarify that no one today on this planet has had a severe reaction to the Covishield vaccine. Does that mean it can never happen after hundreds of millions of people are vaccinated? Of course not. We don't know. We have done all that we can by vaccinating thousands of people, monitoring them for months for safety, to ensure that we adhere safety first, and then, of course, all the other parameters. So, you know, no one can ever guarantee and say that nothing will ever happen, but so far nothing has happened, and as I said, that case was not vaccine related.
You put out a public statement saying the government should indemnify vaccine makers. In case there is a serious side effect, there shouldn't be a lawsuit. What's the current position on that? Has such an indemnity been built into the clause for procurement with the government? Is that something that you're insisting on? And from the customer's perspective, it basically means that God forbid, and I hope nothing goes wrong, but if it does, then the consumer will not have the right to be able to sue the vaccine maker.
Yeah, well, you know, I got a lot of flack for that because people didn't fully understand where I was coming from. Let me explain. Of course, it sounds odd. How can you protect a company and not an individual? even I would feel that that's odd if you just take it out of context. What I was trying to propose, or I am proposing, we've written to the government of India, all the vaccine manufacturers are united in this. And I, as the president of the Vaccine Manufacturers Association, has written this officially to the government to request this, because like the US and other countries, only during the time of a pandemic, we all have to be united together. And why do we have to protect the companies? Because if I'm going to be sued or another company is going to be sued every month, because there could be a case related or not even related to the vaccine pending further inquiry, we are risking the reputation of the vaccine, the company, and most importantly, the immunization campaigns. Can you imagine if there's an injunction from a court in a particular state or even nationwide to stop an immunization campaign where millions of people will not be protected from the vaccine pending further inquiry? So these are the risks. They're very rightly so in the West, have been assessed, weighed, and concluded that there has to be indemnification only during the period of the pandemic, because we're all here united together. We're all trying to reach the same objective of saving everyone's lives. So we all have to take some risk. We took the risk of making the product, doing all this. Now we only ask and plead with the government and the people of India to stand united with us, have faith that we've done all that we can for safety, and we don't risk the immunization campaigns from being stopped if there are lawsuits and injunctions from a court, because that even the government can't then overrule. So that is what I was trying to explain for a limited period of time.
So what's the current status? Has that been accepted? It's a grey area, or at this moment lawsuits can still take place if, God forbid,
No
there is any kind
response.
of
No response
adverse
yet.
reaction?
No response yet. No response yet. Maybe they're thinking about it and working out how to...
How does the Covishield vaccine compare with Pfizer, Moderna, Bharat Biotech? Because Bharat Biotech is the other company that's been given emergency usage permission. So how does your vaccine, first let's deal with Pfizer and Moderna. How does your vaccine, Aadar Poonawalla, compare with the global pharma giant Pfizer and the blue-eyed pharma biotech startup Moderna?
Well, I wish we could have all made vaccines so quickly using messenger RNA, which is an unproven technology, which has never been proven for vaccines before. And suddenly now in 2 and 3 months, we found and heard that these companies have made a messenger RNA vaccine. So I do question the way in which it has been done. But again, it's not my place to comment on other companies. If it is proving to be effective and safe, we welcome that. We just were hoping that other vaccine manufacturers would be able to make a vaccine that's affordable to the whole world and not just 5 or 10% of the world. And that is where, we stand apart. We've been able to provide the vaccine at a very affordable price. And with the efficacy I shared with you, that we're also at 90%. And again, let me just clarify this point of efficacy. Until hundreds of millions of people across the world in different geographies and ethnicities get a vaccine, you can't really conclude how effective a vaccine is. I mean, just with a few thousand people, we can't definitely say that, it'll be 90% effective in Africa, 90% effective in India. We don't know till hundreds of millions of people are vaccinated across the globe with all these vaccines, and then we can really conclude how effective these vaccines were in their ability to bring down severe infections and mortality in a given population. That is how you assess the effectiveness of a vaccine.
Let's now compare with Bharat Biotech. That's the other Indian company that got approval from the Drug Controller of India. People who are watching this broadcast, Mr. Poonawalla, will wonder, should I get Aadar Poonawalla's vaccine? Should I get Dr. Ella's vaccine? How do you view this choice? Because, is it Adidas, Nike, is it Pepsi, Coke? Is it just get what you want and get the vaccine and get on? How do you view this question of which vaccine should a person who's watching you go for?
Look, that is entirely their personal choice. I can't comment on that. But all I will say is that, again, there are only 3 vaccines in the world which have proven efficacy: Pfizer, Moderna, and AstraZeneca, Oxford, Covishield. No other vaccine, many vaccines have proven to be safe, but no other vaccine on this planet has proven efficacy where you've injected a couple of thousand people and statistically shown that in the vaccinated arm, you have found, XYZ amount of less infection and severe infection compared to the placebo arm. So only 3 companies in the world have done that. Now it's for your audience to come to whatever conclusions they want. I really cannot comment on anyone else's vaccines. It wouldn't be fair in my position to do so. So I will just leave you with the facts, and then it's for the people to decide.
Since the morning, there have been many questions asked about how Bharat Biotech's emergency use approvals came through, even though it will be an extension of a clinical trial, in the absence of phase 3 results and the efficacy being made public. Is that something that the government has done that surprised you? How soon Bharat Biotech's got these approvals, Mr. Poonawalla?
Well, it was a surprise because we thought that all companies have to conclude their efficacy studies. But if the government has decided in an emergency to license something which is safe, that's entirely their decision. I don't know what word to use, but that's something you have to ask them. I really can't comment on that.
Lastly, for those watching, when will they have access to your vaccine outside the government distribution system? How soon do you see a scenario where your vaccine will be sold to private chemists and we can go to a chemist shop, buy the vaccine and then get inoculated?
We were thinking probably March or April, but if we can satisfy all the requirements of the government and give it to the needy and the most vulnerable, as I mentioned before that, and the government eases their restrictions, then, that date could be as soon as February in the private market. But again, that's subject to the government deciding on, how they think that'll affect the vulnerable supply of vaccines to the most needy. So we'll have to wait and see. But I think it's realistic to say March. If it can be brought forward, we've got the stock and availability to do so.
Okay, so you're saying in just about 3 months from now, these vaccines could be available privately. You've answered multiple questions. It's a big day for you in your personal journey and for India as we wait those vaccines now to be rolled out to the. All the best, Aadar Poonawalla, for joining us on India Today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Rahul.